On the morning of May 8, 1902, the residents of Saint-Pierre, Martinique, were watching Mont Pelée with growing anxiety that had been building for weeks. The volcano had been restless since February. The ground shook regularly with small earthquakes. Ash was falling on the town so steadily that people shoveled it off their rooftops like snow. The crater lake on the summit was boiling. 4 days before, a lahar, a river of volcanic mud and debris, had swept down the Rivière Blanche and killed 23 workers at a rum distillery on the valley floor. The smell of sulfur was everywhere. The authorities were concerned. But an election was scheduled for May 11th, and the governor of Martinique wanted voters to stay in Saint-Pierre rather than evacuate to the countryside. A scientific commission was convened. Experts were consulted. On May 8th, 1902, the commission published its assessment. Residents could remain in the city without fear. The governor's wife reportedly wrote to her family the very morning, confirming she felt completely safe in Saint-Pierre. At 7:52 a.m. on May 8, 1902, a pyroclastic surge, a superheated cloud of volcanic gas, rock fragments, and ash moving at more than 160 miles per hour, exploded from the northern flank of Mont Pelée and reached Saint-Pierre in approximately 2 minutes. Of the roughly 28,000 people in the city, approximately 2 survived. I am telling you this story today not because Pelée is currently erupting. It is not. But the subduction zone that built Pelée is still active. It is building every volcano on every island in the eastern Caribbean right now, at this moment, at a rate of 20 millimeters per year, and the seismic activity that has been running through this region over the past several weeks. The M6, 0 near Antigua in May, the Venezuela doublet 2 weeks ago, the ongoing low-level shaking, runs directly through the same geological architecture that feeds every one of the 21 active volcanoes in the Lesser Antilles. The question this video's title asks, is more activity coming, has a different and in some ways more complex answer when you're asking about volcanic seismicity rather than just tectonic earthquakes. And I want to give you that answer properly. The Lesser Antilles volcanic arc is the eastern edge of the Caribbean plate. If you draw a gentle curve from Saba in the north down through St. Eustatius, St. Kitts, Nevis, Montserrat, Guadeloupe, Dominica, Martinique, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and Grenada to the south, you have traced the arc of fire that the Atlantic oceanic plate's descent has been building for millions of years. Here is the specific mechanism. The North American and South American oceanic plates are being pushed westward by the spreading of the mid-Atlantic ridge. Where they encounter the Caribbean plate, the denser oceanic crust dips below the lighter Caribbean plate and begins to sink into the mantle, a process called subduction. As it descends and heats up, 2 things happen simultaneously. First, water and other volatile compounds that were locked in the oceanic crust at the surface are driven out by the increasing temperature and pressure. Second, those volatiles migrate upward into the overlying mantle wedge. Water lowers the melting point of mantle rock significantly, so the mantle above the descending slab, which at normal conditions is solid, melts where the volatiles arrive. That melt is magma. It rises buoyantly through the crust above it and builds volcanoes wherever it finds pathways to the surface. This process is not intermittent. It is continuous. The Atlantic plate is subducting at roughly 20 millimeters per year. Every year, fresh oceanic crust slides under the Caribbean plate. Every year, volatiles are driven upward. Every year, magma is generated. The 21 live volcanoes on 11 islands in the Lesser Antilles are not the remnants of a geological process that has ended. They are the current product of a process that has not stopped for millions of years and will not stop during any time scale that matters to the people living on these islands. I covered in a prior video the tectonic earthquake risk of the Caribbean, the fault gap seismicity, the Puerto Rico Trench tsunami potential, the aftermath of Venezuela's doublet. The seismicity I want to talk about today is a different category, driven by a different mechanism with different implications. Volcanotectonic earthquakes, what volcanologists call VT earthquakes, are high-frequency earthquakes generated specifically in the vicinity of active volcanic systems. They occur when rising magma or hot hydrothermal fluids force their way through cracks in the overlying rock, causing those cracks to fail in brittle rupture. The seismic waves from VT earthquakes look different from ordinary tectonic earthquake waves. They have a higher dominant frequency and a shorter coda, and experienced volcanoseismologists can distinguish them from ordinary background seismicity by their waveform characteristics. The significance of VT earthquake swarms is that they are one of the primary signals monitoring agencies watch for as an indication of increasing volcanic unrest. A cluster of VT events beneath a volcano that was previously quiet can indicate that magma is moving, that the hydrothermal system is becoming more energetic, or that the structural integrity of a lava dome or crater floor is changing. They are not definitive proof that an eruption is imminent. Most swarms do not lead to eruptions, But in combination with other monitoring data, ground deformation measured by GPS networks, changes in gas emissions, temperature anomalies in crater lakes, they form the evidence base that volcano observatories use to make alert-level decisions. The volcanic systems I want to discuss specifically are La Soufrière in Guadeloupe, Kikum-Jenny north of Grenada, and Soufrière Hills in Montserrat, because between them they illustrate three distinct volcanic hazard profiles that the Caribbean monitoring community is actively watching. La Grande Soufrière is the highest peak in the Lesser Antilles at 1,167 meters, an active stratovolcano on the Basse-Terre island of Guadeloupe. It has been in continuous low-level unrest since 1992, with ongoing seismic activity, gas emissions from fumaroles and acid crater lakes, and measurable ground deformation. The OVSG-IPGP, the French volcanological observatory that monitors it, has maintained continuous intensive monitoring, seismicity, gas chemistry, ground movement, for decades. As of February 2026, it remains in low-level unrest with ongoing seismic activity and gas emissions. Here is what makes La Soufrière Guadeloupe specifically dangerous in a way that differs from most other Caribbean volcanoes. It is what volcanologists classify as predominantly phreatic. Phreatic eruptions are steam-driven explosions caused by groundwater or hydrothermal water coming into sudden contact with extremely hot rock, superheating into steam so rapidly that it explodes. They do not require fresh magma at the surface to trigger. They can occur with very little warning compared to the typically weeks to months precursor sequence of a magmatic eruption. The warning time before a phreatic explosion can sometimes be measured in hours rather than days. In 1976, La Soufrière Guadeloupe underwent an escalating seismic crisis with multiple explosion craters opening on the summit. Monitoring agencies faced an agonizing decision. The available evidence was consistent with either a major phreatic event or a full magmatic eruption. In August 1976, authorities ordered the evacuation of 72,000 people from the southern part of Basse-Terre. That evacuation, the largest in French Caribbean history at the time, lasted 3.5 months. The volcano produced ongoing phreatic explosions, but never escalated to the feared magmatic eruption. When residents returned in early 1977, the eruption was over. The 1976 event became controversial in a specific way that matters for understanding Caribbean volcanic risk today. One scientific faction argued the evacuation was unnecessary, that the monitoring data never justified the inference of an imminent magmatic eruption. Another maintained it was the only defensible decision given the uncertainty. The economic damage from the months of evacuation was severe, and the outcome? No deaths, limited physical damage, but massive economic cost and social disruption created a legacy of public skepticism about volcanic warnings in Guadeloupe that monitoring agencies there still work against. This is what the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center identified as the critical challenge of volcanic hazard communication. By unfortunate coincidence, the mean interval between such disasters is roughly comparable, with one human lifetime so that the memory of the previous event would have just about faded from public consciousness when the next one occurs. People who remember 1976 as a false alarm may be insufficiently prepared for the next crisis. La Soufrière Guadeloupe today shows strong evidence of unrest since 1992, per the scientific literature monitoring it. Its hydrothermal system has been showing increasing activity for over 3 decades. Daily gas emissions from the summit fumaroles include hundreds of tons of water vapor, carbon dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and hydrochloric acid, the M6. Zaire earthquake near Antigua in May 2026 occurred approximately 70 kilometers north of Guadeloupe, well within the range at which regional earthquakes have historically caused measurable changes in volcanic systems, including acceleration of fumarolic activity and changes in ground deformation patterns. North of Grenada, roughly 9 kilometers offshore in the Caribbean Sea, is Kikum-Jenny, the Caribbean's only known active submarine volcano, and one of the most frequently erupting volcanoes in the region. Since its first documented eruption in 1939, it has erupted at least 15 times, with the most recent confirmed eruptions in 2015 and 2017. The UWI Seismic Research Center reported a period of increased seismicity at Kikum-Jenny in late August 2025, prompting the alert level to be raised to yellow, the second level of a I4-level scale. The specific hazards from Kikum-Jenny are different from those of the land-based Caribbean volcanoes. Its eruptions can generate steam columns rising through the water above it. The water immediately around the volcanic summit can heat and degas, reducing the buoyancy of ships passing over it, a genuine navigation hazard. More significantly, its larger eruptions have generated small tsunamis that have affected the coasts of Grenada and neighboring islands. Its explosive eruptions can also produce volcanic debris that travels upward through the water column and poses risk to aircraft flying over the area. Kikum Jenny is monitored closely precisely because its eruptions can be explosive and relatively sudden, and because it sits in one of the busiest shipping and air traffic corridors in the Caribbean. The exclusion zone around the summit, the area within which vessels are advised not to approach, is periodically extended or contracted based on the current alert level. After the August 2025 seismicity swarm, the zone was maintained at elevated radius until monitoring data indicated the swarm had subsided. The M60 earthquake near Antigua in May 2026 passed seismic waves southward through the entire Lesser Antilles arc, including through the seafloor environment where Kickham Jenny sits. Whether that earthquake influenced Kickham Jenny's behavior in the months following has not been reported as a specific finding, but the general principle that regional earthquakes can trigger changes in submarine volcanic systems is well established in volcanology. Montserrat's Soufriere Hills volcano has been in some state of activity continuously since 1995, making it the longest-running volcanic eruption currently active in the Eastern Caribbean. Its last major eruption phase ran from 2009 to 2013. Since 2013, it has been in a quieter state at hazard level 1, but it continues to produce VT earthquakes and measurable sulfur dioxide gas flux. The Montserrat Volcano Observatory monitors it daily. The specific nature of the Soufriere Hills hazard is the lava dome that has been growing on and off since 1995. A lava dome is a mass of highly viscous lava that piles up over a vent rather than flowing away. Soufriere Hills dome grew to become the highest point on the island at over 1,000 meters. Dome collapse events, when sections of the oversteepened dome slide away, generate pyroclastic flows, fast-moving avalanches of hot gas, ash, and rock fragments that travel down the flanks of the volcano at speeds of hundreds of kilometers per hour. During the 1995 to 2013 eruption period, pyroclastic flows from Soufriere Hills destroyed Plymouth, the island's capital, the only island capital in the Caribbean to have been destroyed by a volcanic eruption in the modern era. 2/3 of Montserrat's population left the island permanently during the eruption. The southern half of the island remains in an exclusion zone. As of 2025, the Montserrat Volcano Observatory reported ongoing VT earthquake detections and measurable SO2 flux. The volcano is in a quiet phase but is not dormant. The distinction between a quiet, active volcano and a dormant one matters enormously for the people of Montserrat, who have rebuilt their lives in the habitable northern portion of the island, while the southern exclusion zone remains off limits. Any reactivation of dome growth would immediately threaten the exclusion zone and potentially require further evacuation. I want to return to where this video started because the story of Mont Pelée did not end in 1902. The volcano that destroyed Saint-Pierre in minutes is still there, still monitored, and still capable. Mont Pelée sits on the northern tip of Martinique, a French Caribbean island with roughly 350,000 residents. After the 1902 catastrophe, the volcano had a minor eruption in 1929 to 1930 that caused some evacuations, but no deaths. Since then, it has been in a broadly dormant state, but not a permanently quiet one. In September 2025, the Institut de Physique du Globe de Paris Observatory on Martinique reported that unrest continued at Pelée, with volcano-tectonic earthquakes detected across the week of September 12th to 19. The monitoring system is active, the scientists are watching, and the VT seismicity was sufficient to generate a formal observatory report for that week. That is not a crisis. But it is consistent with the established pattern of intermittent unrest at a volcano that has not had a major eruption in nearly a century. The significance of Mont Pelée from a hazard standpoint is not just the historical death toll. It is the demographic reality that Martinique's population today is substantially higher than Saint-Pierre's was in 1902, and modern Martinique has extensive urban development on and around the northern slopes of the volcano. A repeat of the 1902 event, which generated a directed lateral blast and nuée ardente, a specific type of pyroclastic surge, would reach populated areas extremely rapidly. Martinique has volcanic evacuation planning, and the OVSG IPGP Observatory provides continuous monitoring. But the 1902 lesson, that expert assessments made under political pressure in the days before an eruption can be fatally wrong, has not lost its relevance. Let me answer the title question directly. Yes, volcanic activity is coming to the Lesser Antilles. That is a geological certainty with a specific evidence base. The subduction process that drives all of these volcanic systems is continuous. The 21 live volcanoes in the arc will continue to receive magma from below and will periodically express that energy in eruptions. The historical record shows at least 34 eruptions since European settlement, with 21 since 1900, roughly one every 5 years somewhere in the arc. That rate is not a prediction for the future, it is the documented history of the past century. What I can say about the current specific situation, La Soufriere Guadeloupe is in a state of low-level unrest that its own monitoring observatory describes as having strong evidence of unrest since 1992. The gas flux at the summit has been increasing. It is monitored by one of the best equipped volcano observatories in the Caribbean. A sudden escalation of seismicity, gas output, or ground deformation would trigger a review of the alert level. The May 2026 regional earthquake was close enough to produce theoretical perturbations to its hydrothermal system, though whether that has occurred has not been reported as a confirmed finding. Kickham Jenny was at elevated alert status 8 months ago in August 2025. Submarine volcanoes are inherently less predictable than land-based ones, because the quantity of monitoring instrumentation that can be deployed on the seafloor is far less than what can be placed on a land surface. Its eruption intervals have been roughly once every few years in the past decade. Another eruption in the coming months or years would be consistent with its historical behavior. Montserrat's Soufriere Hills is quiet, but not inactive. The dome that has been building and collapsing since 1995 still exists. The volcanic system beneath it still receives heat from below. The question of whether it will reactivate is not a question of whether, but of when, and monitoring gives the island's residents and the British government that oversees it the best available warning time. The action call for volcanic hazard is different from hurricane or earthquake preparedness, and it is worth being explicit about the differences. Know your island's alert level system and which agency reports it. For the French islands, Guadeloupe, Martinique, the authority is OVSG IPJP and the Observatoire Volcanologique et Sismologique. For the English-speaking Caribbean, it is the UWI Seismic Research Center based in Trinidad, which maintains the regional monitoring network and posts alert levels for all active volcanic islands. These agencies update their reports frequently when unrest increases. Knowing where to check before you need to matters, because sudden escalation from low-level activity to elevated alert can happen in hours. Understand the difference between a volcanic watch and a volcanic warning. A watch indicates unusual activity is occurring and requires attention. A warning indicates that volcanic eruption is imminent or in progress, and that hazard zones are in immediate danger. The transition from watch to warning does not always allow for extended evacuation preparation. If you live on one of the volcanically active islands, Montserrat, Guadeloupe, Martinique, Dominica, St. Vincent, St. Kitts, or Nevis, know the hazard zones for your specific island. Each island's civil protection agency maintains maps showing the areas most at risk from pyroclastic flows, lahars, and ashfall in different eruption scenarios. These maps exist because they were developed from painful experience. Using them takes 15 minutes. Not knowing them in an eruption emergency can cost far more than that. And for the broader audience watching this, what Montpellier taught us in 1902, and what Caribbean volcanic history has confirmed many times since, is that the islands of the Eastern Caribbean are some of the most beautiful and some of the most volcanically hazardous places on Earth simultaneously. The subduction factory that built them is still running. The question of when it will next demand a dramatic accounting is the question every volcano observatory in the Eastern Caribbean is working, every day, to answer with as much notice as possible. The shaking that has run through this region recently is a reminder that the factory floor is not quiet. I will be monitoring the Volcanic Monitoring Agency's updates alongside the seismic and weather data, and will bring you an update when the picture changes. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.